Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to talk about tips on how to learn to play fast parts on guitar. But I'm going to start out with two disclaimers. Number one is the fact that I'm no superhero and I get kind of frustrated, to be honest, seeing online everyone is playing really fast. Kind of is demotivating because you don't see that many people struggle, you just see the superstars. But I think there are people who struggle, and I'm definitely one of them. Second disclaimer is this is not about fooling people that you're playing fast. I'm talking about the real deal where you play well and fast. So if you want to solo like Dave Mustaine, you can skip this video right now. Now, as I was saying, I'm no superhero shredder, but if you want to see what I was able to achieve by following these tips, then you can check out my Count of Tuscany cover by Dream Theater. It's not a difficult song, but there are bits which are very, very tricky. So without further ado, let's get straight into it with tip number one, and that is to isolate the part. If you're playing a song, and this doesn't even have to be a solo, right? It could just be a lick or even a complicated rhythm part. If you're playing through a song, and let's say the song is 4 minutes, and that part repeats, let's say twice, let's say it's a riff or something, right? That's complicated. The total time that you spend playing that part is maybe 10 seconds out of 4 minutes. So if you spend an hour a day playing that song, that's what, 15 repeats? So 15 times 10 seconds, you've been playing that part for 150 seconds, which is 2.5 minutes out of an hour, right? That is really bad when it comes to improving, right? If you're already playing the rest of the song well, that is not going to go anywhere from you. You don't need to practice those parts. You can sit down for that hour in one day and play that part that you have problems with over and over and over, and suddenly you're playing it 10 seconds, 4 minutes, 4 minutes to 140 seconds. You're playing it like 20 times more, right? In that hour. 20, 24 times more, whatever it is. And it's not actually just additive, because if you spread out the practice of that thing far and wide, first of all, you'll play it wrong every single time, which means you're learning to play it wrong rather than learning to play it right. You're not going to improve basically at all. Whereas if you put those attempts together and you're focusing to get it right, because that's the whole point of you doing this, not to just play the song and enjoy, then you're actually going to improve, right? And it's going to be more multiplicative than additive. So actually, to demonstrate, I've got here a bit of a solo from a new song that my band is working on, and it's just like one part of the solo, and it's pretty complicated. It's not very fast, but it is very, very uncomfortable to play. It's not written on guitar, it's written by our accordion player, and you can really tell. So I'll just play it for you real quick. I've just zoomed into this one part, so let's hear it without a metronome. And this is like in MIDI, by the way. So that is pretty fast. Even if it was comfortable, that is moderate speed, I would say. But it is uncomfortable, which makes this fast. And this is difficult for me, all right? And I'm still trying to get up to speed with it. But that's what I'll use to demonstrate. So that's exactly what I've done here. If you can see on the screen, I've zoomed into exactly that part, and I've played it on repeat. The worst thing you can do is play the whole song front to back, and then play it again front to back. You only have trouble with the solo, but for enjoyment, you kind of play the whole song, so that you don't feel like you're doing work, you know? I get it could be exhausting. But that's the worst thing you can do. The second worst thing you can do is just do repeats of the solo, unless you're kind of getting used to the tempo and pace and the transitions, although there's different things you can do to practice the transitions. And the best thing you can do, well, actually not the best thing, but the second best thing you can do is isolate a part just like this in its entirety, right? From the start of that shreddy part, or that quicker part or complicated part, to the end of the complicated part, and then practice it back to back. And this is what it would look like if I bring it down to like 75%. So zooming in on a part like this will really, really help you learn it. And it's good for non-complex parts that are just fast. For example, if you're doing a 3-note per string thing that is just sequential notes, maybe there is a little bit of complexity. But for complex parts, especially where it's complex on both the left hand and the right hand, where you're doing uncomfortable or unintuitive jumps, I would highly recommend that you split even that part into like 2 or 3 bits and practice those individually. So tip number 2 is to never play it wrong. And of course, it's kind of impossible, but we want to get as close to that as possible. What does that entail though? As you progress apart, my habit was kind of letting the song play, usually in Guitar Pro, letting the tab play, and then like doing incremental increases in speed. But at some point you get to a point where it's too fast for you, and you really, really want to get that fast because you've been playing this part for like 3 hours straight, and you want to play it fast, but you can't. And what happens then when you cannot play it fast is that you start making mistakes, which means you start learning how to play it wrong, which means you're not only not going forward, you're now going backwards, okay? You're teaching yourself and your muscle memory, you're disrupting the flow of your learning, teaching your muscle memory the incorrect way to do it. And you'll have to spend the time to unlearn that and learn the right way afterwards. And this again feeds back to the first point where you're kind of playing through the whole song and playing the difficult parts at the same speed as the easy parts, because most of the song is easy for you. On average, it's easy. There's just one complicated part that you can't quite get. And now you're always playing that complicated part too fast, which means you're never learning how to play it right, which means you're not progressing at all. This is all about slowness, really. Playing it right is all about playing it slow. If you give the argument that you can't play something slow, you can only play it fast, I don't buy that. If you can play something fast, you can play something slow, and if you can't play it slow, then you can't play it fast, 100%. There can be counterexamples to this, like for example, when something becomes part of your muscle memory and it's not actually complicated for you to play physically, it's not physically challenging to your skill, and it becomes muscle memory, and you actually have to concentrate on it and like play it very, very slowly, and you have to remember the notes. Yes, in that case, you may be able to play it at full speed, but not at 10% speed. But when it comes to fast, complicated parts that you know, both mentally, like consciously and subconsciously, that is not the case. If you cannot play it slow, you cannot play it fast. And this is where you have to be brutally honest with yourself, you know? You have to be extremely strict with yourself, which is difficult. What I've learned so far, over 11 years playing the instrument, or 12, however long, almost 13 actually now, wow, is that the stricter you can be with yourself, the stricter I have ever been with myself, the more progress I got. So tip number 2, try to never play it wrong, never play beyond your capability, do push yourself, but another part of that tip is actually, if you do go past the speed and you're feeling like you're not playing perfectly, it means you're starting to regress. Do not allow that to happen. Go back 10%. You're not losing progress, you're actually gaining progress. All right, tip number 3 is to remove effects and isolate your sound of the guitar and how you play as much as possible. And this feeds back to the previous points where I said, don't play it wrong. Well, how do you know when you are playing it wrong, right? Or maybe you're not playing it wrong, but for example, you're not quite hitting a note, or your finger on one note is not quite synced up with your right hand, and you're just kind of playing noise instead of that note, right? That kind of thing is very difficult to isolate and hear when you're playing with a lot of other stuff going on, and it can be really tricky, really. I mean, you can easily trick yourself, so to speak, into feeling like you're playing it better than you actually are. And that's fine. I mean, if it sounds fine within the mix, maybe you're fine with it, but that's not the point here, right? The point here is if you're at 85%, you're not at 100 yet, and you're not quite playing it perfectly, right? But you can't hear that, and you're trying to progress to 100, then as you keep pushing that up, that speed up, that part that you're already not playing perfectly will be even less and less perfect, you know? And eventually, at 100% or 90 or 95, you might get to the point where it is actually a problem, right? And where it is noticeable. But you just spent half an hour playing it not well. So you've kind of, you know, you've not made best use of that time. So let me try and show you this effect in action. And I'm just gonna give myself a little bit more room here. And I'm gonna play it at 85%. I think with proper warm up and at my best, basically, I can play this decently at 85%. But this is pushing it, and you're gonna hear that. Let me just turn on the metronome, and I'm gonna just leave everything playing. I'm gonna play along with the song here, with the MIDI track. So that probably kind of sounded fine, right? Well, let's see what happens if I mute the track, right? And I just leave the metronome. Let's see how that sounds. So there you hear, I lost the whole note there. And this was actually a better example than probably my average. You hear there's uncleanliness there. I lost the note. The note I lost was actually at the difficult place, which is the difficult thing about this whole bit, right? It's not the coming down. and not so much the going up, but there's transition between those two things. And I'm actually gonna leave the tabs on the screen for this bit here, just so you can kind of understand why it's difficult and it's not so vague to you. And of course, just there, I'm just playing it with my rhythm tone, not my lead tone with the delay and a bit of chorus and all that stuff and more gain. I'm playing it with my rhythm tone, which is a lot clearer. But to be honest, if you wanted to go all the way, you'd probably just play it acoustically or like with a clean tone. And that will really, I mean, that will remove the compression. It will show you where your picking is inconsistent and where you're going to get some noise rather than actual notes, which distortion hides very, very well. So my advice is go down to a metronome. Metronome compared to the tab or a track like this, I'm telling you, there's a huge, huge difference. Metronome versus a track. So tip number 4 is all about your left hand and the fingers you use. One thing I've noticed is that, you know, as I was learning more difficult parts, there were the comfortable way to play it because I wasn't used to using the right fingers for the right notes. And for example, you know, rather than involve my pinky in something, I would just use my nameless finger, whatever, ring finger, and compensate for that. But then you kind of have to shift your hand a little bit, and as you increase speed, you know, at slower speeds, it's kind of fine, that shift. You can make full sound in the notes. But as it gets faster and faster, that shift actually becomes, well, you can do it without just missing out on like half a note of sound. And now you've learned to do it that way, and there's nothing you can do about it, really. You know, there's nothing you can do to make it sound perfect. When what you should have done in the first place is change your strategy with the fingers you use. Very, very important to decide for complicated parts, especially the ones that are tricky, to think about your finger strategy and especially the pinky. You know, make use of the pinky. Making use of it early on can accelerate your progress. All right, so tip number 5, and that is to remove context, so to speak. And part of that is actually removing the song and just playing with a metronome. But besides that, there's more that you can do to remove context. You can just play the part, again, without the song, just like I have been doing, have done a few times. Or what's even cooler, what has helped me quite a bit in one of those solos in the Dream Theater song, is playing this same thing at different positions on the neck. And this is quite difficult. And if you can do it, it shows that there is something wrong with, with your muscle memory, right? It means there's something connected to this specific place where your mind latches onto and somehow can hinder you, right? From your actual body executing. See, I'm having trouble there. Landed differently, but yeah, doing that, and again, obviously with a metronome and multiple repeats, you know, just going up the neck, like pick a fret to start, pick a fret to end, that can help quite a bit, really. You'll feel really fresh when you get back to playing the actual thing. So tip number 6, and this is really like, I really can't put it into words, you gotta try it yourself, it's an absolute game changer. And that is when you have a fast part, and this can be even when you're not zooming in like this, but also when you're zooming in like this, you have a fast part, and you're kind of playing through it, and you're getting faster and faster in most of it, except like 5% of it, or like just 1 note or 2 notes, where you just can't, you're kind of losing that quality. And as you go faster and faster, you're eventually gonna just not play that part well at all, right? Like the note in this specific section, right? It's this. It's the ascent from there. It's that ascent from there where I land there down, just one note on that string, and then it goes back up with my pinky and my middle finger. That one note is an ass, okay? To get over that, and again, to me this has been a game changer, but let's say I'm playing at this speed, right? But I'm having difficulty every time at that note, and maybe not even every time, maybe it's half the time. Well, what you can do is actually force yourself, you know, while you're playing along to a metronome. And let me show you right now at 85%, right? Because at 85%, I cannot quite play this well. And what I'm gonna do is, first time, I'm gonna play it with the metronome together, okay, at 85%, and you're gonna hear it's not gonna be perfect. And second time, I'm gonna force myself against the metronome to slow down on that part and play it right. And yeah, check this out. Actually, I played it well there, but let's pretend I didn't, okay? This is how it would slow down. See, I literally had to physically force myself, and it's becoming easier because I'm doing this quite a lot. But it's going to be so difficult to do it, right? To just ignore the metronome, ignore the track you're playing to, and slow down and play it right. But I assure you, it's going to pay off. All right, so tip number 7 is to add accents into what you're playing. And I think I've seen John Petrucci give this tip as well, probably a lot of other guitarists too. Maybe it wasn't even a tip for learning, like improving your speed, but more like playing a very fast part in time, is to accent certain notes, right? And you accent the notes that are comfortable for you, but it really begins to align those notes to the grid and making sure you're not weaving in and out of time. That's for the time bit, but in terms of helping you progress, adding those accents, and this is actually not a very good bit to demonstrate adding accents on, but in a bit where you're playing 3 notes per string, or where you're going back and forth between notes, between strings, like a typical thing, like actually there's another part of the same solo. So there you can add accents, listen to it. So that will not only help you with timing, but it will help to place your right hand and your left hand synchronization. It's kind of like, think about it like this, you play one note, you're completely synchronized, second note you're slightly off, third note you're even more off. Well, now you put an accent on the third note, you're again synchronized, and it just really improves the tightness there, and it can like fast forward you 5 to 10%. I'm not kidding, doing that, if you can do that with the part that you're learning. All right, tip number 8 is paying attention to your right hand. And one thing I've come to realize is that unless you're like sweep picking, your left hand is actually less skill needed. It's less intricate, it's less difficult than the right hand technique. A lot of the times when you play bits just like this one here, the actual messiness is in your right hand, not your left hand, or the alignment between the two hands. You kind of can't know a part fully or play it perfectly unless both hands play it perfectly. One thing that I found when trying to learn this 2 note per string thing from that Dream Theater song, I couldn't look at my right hand, you know? I was looking, okay, what am I doing with my right hand? How am I picking the strings? And every time I would look at my right hand, I would mess up. And then I kept doing it. I'm like, no, this doesn't make any sense. Like, my left hand knows exactly what it's doing. I don't need to be looking at it. And I can look away and play the same thing very easily. So why is it that when I look at my right hand and concentrate on what it's doing, not necessarily even concentrate, but just try to observe, why is it that I start making mistakes? And that's because my right hand has no idea what it's doing, okay? It's going on autopilot, that's why. And that autopilot is something that messes you up and loses your tightness and loses your quality. And may mean that you at some point like hit 2 strings instead of 1 when trying to do a string jump, or you don't hit a string at all, or you just hit it at the wrong time. So I persevered with it. I was like, no, I'm annoyed. Why can I not look at my right hand? I persevered, and eventually I could look at my right hand and I could concentrate on what it's doing. And I found that I could actually play the part faster and cleaner right away, like right from that point when I could look at my right hand. And this bit right here also started the same way. I couldn't look at my right hand, but let's see if I can do it now. Yeah, I can do it because I know what my right hand is doing. I know when it's going. And the other way I would describe this is when you first look at your right hand, you'd be surprised how it looks. And that's the issue, right? Imagine if you knew what you were doing with your left hand and suddenly you looked at it and you're surprised and you're like, that's not how it feels. Anyway, moving on to tip number 9. And that is, again, related to the right hand, and that is picking strategy. As I was saying earlier, the right hand is vastly important. Playing parts like this clean and consistently and perfectly is all about alternate picking. And a lot of times what I've done is I learn to play a part, I just play it the way, however I play it, right? I just like see the notes, I play. I learn it, and I don't put any thought into how my pick is working. And even more importantly, my picking is actually inconsistent in the sense that one repeat of a certain part, I pick in a certain order, like for example, alt pick, and on another repeat, I might make an economy movement just once, which means it changes every single picking direction after that, unless I do another one of those. And what that does is, it's just not possible to progress again. Your hand literally doesn't know what's going on, right? It's an autopilot at this point. It's not programmed to do what it's supposed to do. You might get a couple of hours of practice on a certain run, right? On just one run. And suddenly you realize, wait, I'm playing this differently every time, and it's impeding my ability to play it consistently and faster. And so you have to, go back 10% or 15% and figure out what the pattern is that you want to follow every single time from that point on. It's best to just start off with a picking strategy, the one that you know is going to work, and just progress with that. Don't waste any time. All right, so here we are at the last tip. Tip number 10, holding my pick. Tip number 10 is a pretty simple one. It's all about rest, right? Don't beat yourself up over not making progress. Sometimes you can make 1%, 5%. I know I'm speaking about percents. Maybe other people don't think in terms of percentages. But let's say you make a little bit of progress in a day. It's a little bit frustrating. Give yourself rest. Probably lots of you have noticed this before, but when you go to bed, you come back the next day, you're going to be amazed. When you've practiced, when you followed all of these steps, when you've been strict with yourself, and you've made sure to put the quality into your playing, right? Develop your speed with quality in mind. You go have, your 8-hour beauty sleep. You come back the next day and you're going to be amazed at what you can do. I'm not sure if this is just because you get tired by the end of your practice session and you're just not as good as when you're fully rested. But I also feel like whatever you've learned, what your body and your muscles have learned in muscle memory during your practice session, you're going to come back and it's going to be ingrained into those muscles. That's what it feels like. So yeah, just let yourself rest and you're going to come back better the next day. If you're interested in seeing what these tips have done for me, who is really, I'm just an average Joe, okay? Not a shredder who has secretly spent 20 years honing his craft and has suddenly come out and he seems like a prodigy or something. No, not one of these people. I have difficulty playing guitar, as I said, even at moderate speeds, and I have to really work on it. But, if you want to see the effects of what I've done for myself with this, you can check out this video where, again, I covered that Dream Theater song. But anyway, that's where I'm going to end it. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please leave a like and consider subscribing. And I'll see you in the next one.